to serve on the International Trade Commission, James Bernard Coughlin of Illinois and Haley L. Craig of Pennsylvania. There is one piece of committee business I'd like to address before I get to these nominations. We want to welcome Senator Kim. This is his first hearing since joining the committee, and we look forward to working with him often in the days ahead. The International Trade Commission has three important jobs in ensuring international trade is fair and benefits U.S. workers and U.S. businesses. First, the Commission is charged with investigating foreign trade cheats and standing up for American industries when they have been harmed. Second, it takes stock of how tariffs and other trade policies impact our economy. Finally, it maintains the list of products and tariff rates known as the Harmonized Tariff Schedule. To sum it up, the Commission does a lot of serious work in terms of enforcement and carrying out our country's trade rules. I look forward to hearing from our nominees today about how they're going to approach this important responsibility. Now, the Senate's got a lot of business this morning. When I mentioned this to Senator Crapo, he said, "You're kidding me, I didn't know." So I suspect it would be fair to say that we're going to be talking a lot about trade in this committee for the coming year. My view is that the country needs to pull out all the stops to fight back against underhanded trade cheating, particularly by bad actors in China and elsewhere. And I want to make it clear that I will work with anybody who shares that goal. I also want to make it clear that I think it's important to be as reasonable as possible on this idea of slapping tariffs on everything that American families buy day in and day out. In my view, Donald Trump's tariffs are going to raise a lot of costs. And I just think hitting families that are already suffering from inflation is not a wise idea. So I hope this committee will continue, as we have done for decades in the past, to work in a bipartisan way on real solutions rather than campaign slogans. Senator Crapo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I also want to welcome Senator Kim. We appreciate you being with us here on the committee. The International Trade Commission, or ITC, is an important institution. It provides Congress and the administration with important economic analysis of trade issues. It also plays a critical role in trade enforcement. The ITC Section 337 process is a vital tool for U.S. companies facing unfair competition from foreign imports that infringe on their intellectual property. The ITC also enforces our laws against dumped or subsidized foreign imports through objectively assessing whether there is any injury to our domestic industries. I look forward to our hearing today and hearing from our nominees on the following questions. How will you ensure that you apply the trade laws objectively? To paraphrase Chief Justice Roberts, how do you know you are calling the balls and strikes rather than changing the strike zone? Would you make it a regular practice to try to visit our manufacturers? Our former colleague, Senator Portman, once said that commissioners need to develop expertise in particular industrial sectors, and that by taking the time to visit specific manufacturers, it can really help develop that expertise. And then finally, what is your general understanding of the statutory factors that go into a public interest assessment? With that, let me turn it back to Senator Wyden.
Thank you, Senator Crapo. We're glad to have some of our colleagues here to do the introduction. Senator Durbin will introduce our first nominee, Jim Coughlin. Senator Durbin, welcome. You are always someone we look forward to working with on trade and economic issues. And please go ahead with your introduction.
Thank you, Chair Wyden, and my friend Mike Crapo. Thank you both for this hearing. Other members of the committee, it's an honor to be here. I spent the last 4 years chairing the Senate Judiciary Committee in this neighborhood across the hall, where one of our most important tasks is confirming highly qualified, even-handed judges for our federal courts, lifetime appointments. During my time as chair, it's been my privilege to evaluate literally hundreds of Americans. So I understand this process, and I understand what makes a person a spectacular nominee, for a Senate-confirmed position, especially someone with background in the law. It is my privilege to introduce you to Jim Coughlin, who is being considered by this body today to be a member of the U.S. International Trade Commission. An Illinois native, Jim currently serves as Senior Vice President and General Counsel at the Export-Import Bank of the United States. He is both ready and qualified to serve on the International Trade Commission, in large part because he's already familiar with their work. Jim previously served as an attorney in private practice, where he focused on litigation in front of this very body which he's been nominated to sit on. And before that, served as senior staff attorney at the ITC. But his qualifications don't stop there. Over the course of his career, Jim served as legal counsel for Senator Carl Levin of Michigan and judicial clerk for Judge Marlon Bennett of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. His excellence has been noticed. Jim was recognized by the Chambers Global and Chambers USA, which identifies the most outstanding law firms and lawyers, and he was chosen as Crane Chicago Business Notable Gen X Leader in Law honoree. Jim is not only a spectacular attorney, well-versed on matters of trade, but a good person and can serve our nation faithfully. He's also a dedicated husband. His wife, Sheila, and daughter, Emma, are here today, and he has two others, Connor and Carolyn. Perhaps the truest testament to his character is the fact that through it all, he's still a loyal Chicago White Sox fan. I have every confidence he'll be bringing that dedication and loyalty with him in the role on the U.S. International Trade Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Durbin. Mr. Coughlin, I can tell you, back when I was dreaming of my career in the NBA, my mom always said after a game, "Dear, make sure you're running with the right crowd." With Senator Durbin, you know you're running with the right crowd. Welcome, and we'll have some formalities here in a few minutes. But first, we want to invite Senator Cruz to introduce our second nominee, Haley Craig. The Commerce Committee historically has worked closely with the Finance Committee. We're going to do that in the future. Why don't you go ahead and proceed, Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member Crapo. I have to say, our colleague Senator Durbin, he had me right up until that White Sox comment, and that I think you need to vigorously question on that front. I'm very proud to be here today to introduce Haley Craig as a nominee to be a member of the U.S. International Trade Commission. Haley has served in several roles on Capitol Hill, most recently as the Policy Director for Tech on my staff at the Commerce Committee. Before joining my staff, Haley served as a senior advisor to our former colleague, Senator Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania. At the Commerce Committee, Haley has worked admirably, running point on my investigation into big tech, which focused on the culture of collusion between social media companies and government entities that sought to silence mostly conservative voices. Haley's unique understanding of tech policy and her strong experience in other policy portfolios has helped advance our priorities on the Commerce Committee, and she has played a critical role in much of my preparation for the last 2 years. A dogged researcher, Haley has played a key role in vetting nominees for both the Commerce and Banking Committees. And given that, I have no doubt that she is exceptionally prepared for your questions today. Even so, I would ask that you be gentle and not test that preparation too vigorously. I also want to recognize the key role that Haley played in the development of bipartisan legislation called the Take It Down Act that the Senate just recently passed, and God willing, that is about to pass the House this week, which empowers the victims of non-consensual sexually exploitive images, including AI-generated deepfakes. When enacted, this legislation will make a tremendous difference for victims of this heinous crime, and it will provide future ones with pathways for the removal of and the prosecution of the publication of these abusive images. That legislation borrows the mechanism from the Digital Millennium Copyright Act to put an obligation on tech companies to remove non-consensual explicit images, giving the victims the power to get the garbage offline. Without Haley, I don't know that the measure would have gotten off the ground. She has been a tireless advocate for victims of sexual exploitation and violence, whether in the Take It Down Act or her work to protect the Federal Crime Victims Fund, and to ensure child advocacy centers have the means necessary to help victims of abuse. Haley approaches each project with attention to detail, reliance on facts supported by data, and thoughtful consideration of the implications of any public policy. These traits make for a well-prepared and engaged staffer, and they will serve her well as a member of the U.S. ITC and in any role she serves in the future. I have no doubt she will apply the law as it is written and do so fairly and without any personal policy preferences. She has gained a reputation for working respectfully with colleagues on both sides of the aisle, which will serve her well in this nonpartisan role. If confirmed, her counsel will be as appreciated by the Commission as it has been by me. I know a number of Haley's family members and friends are here to support her today, and I know that even more are watching her from home in Pennsylvania. Mr. Chairman, I'll close with this. Haley Craig's commitment to public service has been unyielding, and there is no question that she would make an excellent member of the U.S. ITC. Thank you for allowing me to join you this morning.
Senator Cruz, thank you for your comments, and I know you know the nominee well, and that really counts. We have some obligatory questions we've got to ask each of the nominees. First, is there anything that you're aware of in your background that might present a conflict of interest with the duties of the office to which you've been nominated? We'll start with you, Mr. Coughlin.
No.
Ms. Craig.
No.
Second, do you know of any reason, personal or otherwise, that would in any way prevent you from fully and honorably discharging the responsibilities of the office to which you've been nominated?
No, sir.
No.
Third, do you agree without reservation to respond to any reasonable summons to appear and testify before any duly constituted committee of the Congress if you're confirmed?
Absolutely, yes.
Yes, Senator.
Finally, do you commit to provide a prompt response in writing to any questions addressed to you by any senator of this committee?
Yes.
Yes.
Very good. So let's have opening statements now from starting with you, Mr. Coughlin, then we'll go with you, Ms. Craig. We're going to make your prepared statements a part of the record in their entirety. I know there's almost a physiological compulsion to read every single word. That's not necessary, and if you'd like to just proceed as you choose for 5 minutes or so, that'd be great. We'll start with you, Mr. Coughlin.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Wyden and Ranking Member Crapo and members of the committee. I'm honored to be here today as a nominee for Commissioner at the USITC. I want to thank the committee for considering my nomination and the President for placing his confidence in me. I also want to thank Senator Durbin for his kind introduction. I'd like to acknowledge the members of my family who are here with me today. I wouldn't be here without the support of my wife, Sheila Nix, sitting behind me. I also have 3 children of which I'm proud, Emma, Connor, and Caroline, and my daughter Emma is here today. I also want to thank my mentors, colleagues, and friends for their advice over the course of my career. I was raised in Chicago along with my 4 siblings. My mother, a homemaker, and my father, a proud Chicago public school teacher for over 30 years, instilled in us the importance of hard work and service to community. I started my career as a staff attorney at the International Trade Commission. The time I spent at the ITC created the foundation for my legal work, which I carried with me throughout my career. There, I took my first depositions, examined witnesses, and made arguments at hearings. The ITC attorneys were great mentors who taught me how to formulate arguments and write clear and concise legal briefs. In addition, the administrative law judges at the ITC were always very patient with me, willing to coach new lawyers through proceedings. Perhaps most importantly, everyone at the ITC shared in its mission to protect American industry, including through the research analysis of the ITC produces to inform Congress and the executive branch. After departing the ITC, I continued to hone my skills, working for a time with Senator Levin on judicial issues. In my private practice, I developed an expertise in intellectual property and trade secret law, which I believe provides me with a unique lens to bring to ITC proceedings. I've been honored to be recognized by Chambers Global, Chambers USA, and also very honored to have served as law clerk for Judge Marion Bennett, U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. Most recently now, I'm honored to serve as Senior Vice President General Counsel at the Export-Import Bank of the United States. I'm confident my experience and skills will allow me to meaningfully contribute to the ITC and carry its mission forward. Returning to the ITC as a commissioner, if I am privileged to be confirmed, would be the capstone of my career, especially serving alongside new and old ITC colleagues. I hope to provide the same mentorship and guidance that was given to me at the start of my career to those who too see the law as a calling and those who approach their legal responsibilities in an ethical, just, and impartial manner. I look forward to answering your questions and, if confirmed, to be a partner in to this committee and this Congress.
Good. We'll have questions in a moment. Ms. Craig.
Chairman Wyden, Ranking Member Crapo, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I am grateful to Leader McConnell for supporting my nomination and to the President for nominating me to be a member of the U.S. International Trade Commission. With me in the hearing room is my younger sister, Erin, my soon-to-be brother-in-law, Chris, and colleagues of all political stripes with whom I've had the honor of working with throughout my nearly 7 years of public service in the Senate. Watching remotely are my parents, my grandparents, and my former boss, Senator Toomey. My upbringing deeply shaped my interest in public service. I have witnessed firsthand how the American economy can serve as a rising tide for all families, regardless of socioeconomic status. I have also witnessed what it is like for those who are left behind. My family's story, like so many, is a testament to the greatness of the American experiment and the tremendous hope and opportunity that this country affords. Having been persecuted by the Nazis because she was Polish, my great-grandmother, Sophie, was transferred between prisoner of war camps, including a forced labor camp during World War II. She sailed to Ellis Island following the war with her baby son in tow. Her extraordinary resilience and strength in the face of adversity will always inspire me. Her son, my grandfather Henry, who is watching today, went on to enlist in Vietnam at age 18 as a non-commissioned officer. His service to country has also inspired me, including my decision to pursue public service. I was born and raised in Pipersville, Pennsylvania, where my parents still live today. My father worked as a traveling furniture salesman in his late teens before beginning a career as a painting contractor, a job he still does with pride at age 72. My mother dedicated most of her adult life to supporting our family from home. Like many Americans, my parents were working class. They didn't have the privilege of having a four-year degree, but they worked very hard and made significant sacrifices to give me and my sister access to opportunities that they never had. When the Great Recession hit in 2008, my father was out of work for over 2 years. Despite the severe financial hardship, my parents continued to prioritize education, and I did what I could do to earn money. I was fortunate to earn a nearly full scholarship to a high school where I participated in an internship program on Capitol Hill. That formative experience as an intern in the office of the late Senator Tim Johnson set me on a path to public service in the Senate. I believe my roles as a senior policy advisor for Senator Cruz and Senator Toomey, working on trade, technology, and other issues, has prepared me well to support the ITC in its important work, analyzing facts, deliberating, and advancing trade matters in a nonpartisan fashion. As part of my roles, I have worked with countless constituents across Pennsylvania, Texas, and our nation who are affected by trade policy decisions made in Washington. I have also developed expertise across many areas of trade law and policy. Throughout my Senate service, it has been my privilege to work with staff on both sides of the aisle, including Chairman Wyden's and Ranking Member Crapo's trade staff. Crucial to the mission of the ITC is the nonpartisan, objective application of U.S. trade remedy, unfair import, and safeguard laws. The Commission also plays an important role in advising Congress, including this committee, and the executive branch on trade matters. I have deep respect and admiration for the Commission's longstanding reputation as an independent, neutral, and fact-based body. If I am given the opportunity to sit on the Commission, I will uphold these values and obligations. Through my work on the Hill, I've never lost touch with how trade policy affects workers and businesses across the United States. I know firsthand what being out of work does to a family and its future. If I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, I will bring with me to the job every day my personal experience that first ignited my desire to serve my country. I'm extremely grateful to be here before the committee today. I look forward to the committee's questions.
Thank you very much. And we're going to start with the whole issue of trade enforcement. Historically, what the committee has always been about is opening markets overseas and enforcing the laws, particularly here at home, to protect our workers and businesses. Now, a big part of enforcement is the trade lingo, and that's how I characterize it, of AD and CVD cases. These are really the bread and butter tools for enforcing protections for workers and businesses in areas like solar and softwood lumber and steel, and rooting out unfair trade practices. I think what I'd like to ask of each of the nominees, we'll start with you, Mr. Coughlin, is how do you see, as a member of the commission, getting results through these two tools, AD, CVD? Please.
Thank you for that question, Senator Wyden. And yes, you raise a really important point. I think if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, the important thing is to look at the statute and apply it in a fair and an unbiased way, keeping in mind that the decisions of the commission can impact jobs and industries. And I think it's also important, if I were fortunate enough to be confirmed, to make sure that, as Senator Crapo had said, if invited, I would welcome an opportunity to visit, to get outside Washington, D.C. and visit your state and others and meet with people to make sure that I understand fully the issues that they're facing even before a complaint is ever filed, so that I have a good understanding of the issues outside the Beltway, and also making sure that if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, that I take advantage of all the PhDs and other experts at the commission and the benefit of their knowledge to get to the right answer.
Okay, Ms. Craig.
Mr. Chairman, Congress has been very clear in authoring Title VII, our safeguard laws, as well as our unfair import laws, in what this committee in particular wants the commission to look at when it is deciding on an anti-dumping case or a safeguard case or a 337 case. So my understanding is that every case is unique and extremely fact-dependent, and it is the job of the commissioners to set aside any personal policy preferences and apply the law as written. Again, Congress has been very clear in writing our anti-dumping laws, what it wants the commission to consider and not consider, including factors such as volume of imports, price, and conditions of domestic industry, all of which are elucidated in detail in the statute.
All right, let's talk tariffs for a moment and start with you, Mr. Coughlin. Donald Trump has called himself, his quote, not mine, a tariff man. And he's threatened to slap tariffs on every good from every country, jacking up prices for American families and small businesses, as far as I can tell, with no strategy. Now, I've always made it clear that tariffs are a tool for the trade toolbox. They're something that I accept, but they've got to be targeted. They've got to have a goal. They've got to have a clear plan. Now, there are a number of authorities President Trump could use to impose tariffs. Under Section 201 of the Trade Act, for example, the president can impose tariffs if the commission finds that there's been a surge of imports that is harming our industries, or our U.S. industry specifically. So my question for the two of you is, if the ITC is asked to do one of these investigations, what's called a Section 201 investigation, how would you go about, and on this I would like as much in terms of specifics as possible, how would you ensure that that investigation goes forward in a thorough, fair, and independent way, free from any political interference from President Trump or his administration? Mr. Coughlin, then Ms. Craig.
Thank you for that question, Senator Wyden. And I did want to say at the outset that I agree with you that tariffs have been an important tool for in United States trade policy for over 100 years. Having said that, while it would be inappropriate for me to speak on any particular tariff not being at the commission and not having all the information in front of me, I think that, as my bio has indicated, I used to work at the ITC when I started my career, and my experience there was that everyone acted in a nonpartisan, collegial manner, and that people always focused on building the factual record and making their decisions based on the record that's in the facts that are in that record and not going beyond that. So if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, I would want to maintain that tradition that I know and that I have seen over the years where the decisions that are made are fact-based and based on the law as policymakers such as yourselves have articulated, and as well as the decisions of our reviewing courts. And I can commit to you today, sir, that if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, that I will maintain that tradition of basing decisions on the facts in the record, applying the law in an impartial and independent mindset.
Ms. Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The ITC is an independent agency. As you know, all of the commissioners that are currently on the ITC are serving in expired terms, and there are 2 vacancies on the Republican side. The ITC really should be 3-3, Republican, Democrat, and if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, and if Mr. Coughlin is fortunate enough to be confirmed, we would be serving in statutory terms, which would help in terms of isolating the commission from certain partisan or political pressures. That said, setting that aside, it's the job of every single commissioner to be independent and fact-based and consider every single case on the merits and in accordance with the statute as Congress intended. The commission is also known for having a number of unanimous decisions and being fairly collaborative among commissioners, which I think speaks to the commission's impartiality and record of following the law.
Senator Crapo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as I indicated in my opening statement, I have 3 questions for each of you. Both of you have essentially answered the first question in very good fashion, which was how will you ensure that you apply the trade laws objectively and make sure you're calling balls and strikes. So I won't ask you to go through that again. I think that you have also both indicated that you are very open to meeting with manufacturers and studying their industries as you are required to analyze and detail and deal with them. So I'll just go to my third question. Before I do so, though, and kind of as a lead into this, my question is, what is your general understanding of the statutory factors that go into a public interest assessment? Before I do that, though, I wanted to say, Mr. Coughlin, I appreciated your response to the tariff question. As I understood your response, you said, I can't really respond to a tariff that hasn't been imposed yet. I think we ought to, before we start attacking something, we ought to find out what it is. And I think that we all agree that tariffs are appropriate tools if used in the right way. And we all agree that there is a wrong use of tariffs. And we'll get into that as we move through the next 3 or 4 years. But I appreciated the fact that you declined to, analyze or critique a policy that has not yet even been established. That helped me understand that you would be objective. So then to each of you, if you could just briefly say, tell me what your general understanding of the statutory factors are that go into public interest assessment. Let's start with you, Ms. Craig.
Thank you, Senator. So my understanding is that there are 4 statutory factors that the commission must consider in a 337 case, which I would like to say is distinct from a Title VII or a safeguard case. There is no public interest test in those 2 matters. But in a 337 investigation, the commission does look at the public interest, and that is defined, 1, as I believe public health and welfare. Second, the competitive conditions in the U.S. economy. Third would be an analysis of the presence of like or similar products in the U.S. economy. And fourth would be U.S. consumers.
Thank you. Mr. Coughlin.
Thank you, Senator. And of course, Ms. Craig is 100% correct in her answer. In my experience practicing before the commission and working there, the public interest factors typically often boil down to a question of, is there an alternative in the market so that if the commission were to issue an exclusion order, would third parties be able to obtain that product that they need? Maybe it's a component for something that they're building, or what have you? Are there other sources, or are third parties who weren't involved in the action going to get harmed because, for example, the only source of a particular product is now being barred from the U.S.? So in my practice, it seems like it often boils down to that question, and I've seen specifically that the Commission will issue tailored remedies so that, for example, maybe the remedy won't go into effect for 6 months or 4 months so that alternative substitutes can be brought to market so that third parties aren't harmed.
Thank you very much.
Thank my colleague. Next will be Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you. Again, welcome. Congratulations on your nominations. Thank you for your willingness to serve, and welcome to all of your family members as well. Let me follow up on Senator Crapo's first question, because this was my initial question, and I have to just couch this with what I hear from so many companies that have concerns that the public interest analysis is not factored in when you guys are making these decisions. Specifically, and you talked about the factors in a statute, and that's great because I can cite that too. But my question more is, for both of you, how do you implement it? If you're inside the Beltway, and you're getting your analysis inside the Beltway, and your research and your investigation comes to you sitting inside the Beltway, how do you make a decision for a company that's maybe on the West Coast or in the Midwest or in that community that there is a public interest and that public welfare is being impacted or the public health is being impacted? How will you make that decision? I'm curious how you implement those factors. Mr. Coughlin, let me start with you.
Thank you so much for that question, Senator. I think that one option that we would have that I had in my experience when I was practicing for the Commission is that we had a really large case that involved cell phones that everybody has, that the Commission actually then ordered a public interest hearing. So in other words, like most often they would just take evidence that was submitted to them and make a decision. But in situations where it's such a critical issue, the Commission has in the past held a public interest hearing and invited third parties who normally don't really have a seat at the table to come in, present evidence, and explain, how a remedy might impact them. And so I think that would be one thing that I would suggest is that when we have situations like that, maybe offering third parties more of an opportunity to provide information, to come to DC and to inform the Commission so we make the right decision.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Craig.
Thank you for the question, Senator. Is my understanding in a 337 investigation that the public interest determination or fact-finding, I should say, can be delegated to the ALJ that is running the case. But at the end of the day, it can always rise at the Commission level. I think Mr. Coughlin's exactly right in terms of having broad transparency in public hearings. I would also, Ranking Member Crapo brought this up, and so did Mr. Coughlin, but I think it is important to be doing site visits and to visit manufacturers and affected facilities. I will say in my role at the Senate Commerce Committee, I've been fortunate to be able to go on some site visits to industries that are impacted by policies that we make. So, for example, visited a drone manufacturer. We visited the Port of Virginia to see how port operations worked. And most recently, I actually was able to climb a cell tower with the cell tower climbers, which was, I really need to get back in the gym, but it really is eye-opening to just learn how products are made. Obviously, only in the 337 cases is the Commission able to consider public interest, but obviously, if Congress is contemplating any changes to that statute or to other statutes within the jurisdiction of the Commission, I would commit to providing you any information that you need objectively to make the right policy decision.
Does the statute prevent you from having those public interest hearings actually in communities where they're being impacted? Can you go to those communities and have field hearings, public interest hearings there instead of bringing everybody here to Washington?
That's a really interesting question, Senator. I had never thought of it. I don't think there's a reason we can't do that, but if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, I'm sure that we can look into that and get an answer.
There's nothing in the statute that would prevent that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I thank my colleagues. Senator Kim.
Yeah, thank you.
These are your first questions.
That's right. Thank you. No, now the pressure's on. But thanks so much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member, for letting me be a part of this. And thank you to the two of you and your families for joining up here. I just last week I was able to have my family be able to be up here as I came into this body, so I know how important that is. Mr. Coughlin, I think I'd like to start with you. I mean, you just had this discussion about Section 337. You've had an extensive, litigation, extensive experience litigating this. I guess I'd like to just ask you, I think a part of this is the work that we do, but also how we articulate this to the American people about the work that we do. So, I'll be honest with you, a lot of people in my home state don't necessarily know all the intricacies of these different things. So I guess I always say, it's important for us to learn how to speak human about this and be able to articulate that. So if you don't mind just kind of explaining, what is the rationale for Section 337? What is the benefit that it can provide to the American people to have that kind of tool at our disposal?
Sure. Thank you for that question, Senator, and I'll try and keep it brief. The answer is that, so obviously we have intellectual property laws and things like patents and trademarks and copyrights to create an incentive for people to invent. We see in situations in other countries, say like China, where they did not have strong IP laws, that they didn't really have any innovation because there was no motivation to do anything. If you created something, someone would just steal your idea. So we have that desire on the one hand to have strong IP rights to create an incentive. On the other hand, we also have consumers and folks in the United States who, we want them to pay as low a price, we want to have a lower price as we can for consumers. And so that's really the balance of 337. And so when I worked there, for example, as a staff attorney, we would be balancing, on the one hand, the intellectual property right owners' right to protect his creation, his invention, create incentive, versus on the other hand, we don't want to enforce IP rights that are actually not valid, because then it just drives up price for consumers. So as simple as I can explain it, when I was at the commission, it's like, is this IP right? Is it valid? In which case, we want to enforce it, versus actually, is it not? And then we want to have more competition so that prices come down. And
one thing I appreciate as I was reviewing some of your previous work is talking about the need for speed in terms of how the ITC operates. Can you go into a little bit more greater detail in terms of why you think that speed is so important in terms of adjudicating this quickly?
Sure, absolutely. So in a nutshell, you could also file a complaint in district court if you want to enforce your IP rights. But of course, the district courts have a lot of other cases and things going on, and so generally speaking, they don't move as quickly as one might hope. And if you have a domestic industry, if you're, I've had clients who have come up with a new product, but if they don't get a remedy and keep the infringing import out of the U.S., they could go out of business by the time the case runs its way through a district court. And that's why the commission has these tight deadlines and why everyone's trying to move so quickly, because we know that if we don't act fast and there are infringing imports coming into the U.S., if we don't get a quick remedy, then people are going to lose jobs, companies are going to go bankrupt.
Ms. Craig, I'd like to just pivot to you here. I really appreciated in your testimony, you talked about your deep respect for the independent, neutral mission of the ITC. Can you explain a little bit more why that is so critical and why that needs to be protected?
Senator, it's really critical that Americans can trust in their institutions, and in particular with the ITC. It is an agency that since 1916 has been able to maintain a stellar reputation for being nonpartisan and objective. If you are a litigant before the ITC, regardless if you're the respondent or the petitioner, you are spending a lot of time and money to be there. It is very important that you feel that you are getting a fair shake by every commissioner that is sitting at the hearing, and that the commission is asking smart questions and weighing all the evidence and creating a full a full docket of evidence in order to make a decision on the facts of the case.
So, I mean, I think that's important, especially at a time right now when we see such great distrust in government and needing to try to restore that sense. And, I appreciate the ranking member's comments earlier about, when we're talking about tariffs here, about making sure, we find out what it is that's going to be proposed. And, I certainly agree with that. But I guess I just want to ask the two of you here at the close here, when we do find out about what the proposal is and where we're going when it comes to tariffs and the use of it, can you confirm that if you're on ITC that this is something that you will look into and give us your independent, nonpartisan view and expert opinion on what the effects would be?
Absolutely, absolutely. An independent, unbiased, based on the facts and the record view, absolutely.
Ms. Craig?
Yes, Senator. If confirmed, I'll respond to requests from Congress in a timely manner and provide you any data and information you need.
Thank you so much. I yield back.
Thank my colleague, and I'm struck by the fact that Senator Kim just asked his first questions here, eloquently, I might add, and now Senator Cardin is going to ask his last questions here.
You're putting a lot of pressure on me.
No, I'm not done. There's a minute here about you. This is a very hard moment for a lot of us who've been such great admirers of Senator Cardin. He and I came to public service together. And whether it's trade, whether it's healthcare, whether it's retirement, he always gives public service a good name. And in particular, I can't even guess how many conversations you and I have had on trade about how we recognize that opening markets, which is hugely important for workers and businesses, and tough trade enforcement are not mutually exclusive. You can do both, but you have to really think through what the issues are all about, as Senator Kim pointed out. So, Senator Cardin, I wasn't able to talk you into running again. That was a great source of frustration. You have a wonderful replacement in the Senate. We're just going to miss you tremendously. And go ahead with your question.
Well, Senator Wyden, first of all, thank you, and Senator Crapo for the leadership on this committee. Senator Wyden's been a friend for a long time, since my days in the House of Representatives when we were both there, and I followed him here to the United States Senate. Your knowledge on the issues of the jurisdiction of this committee is unmatched by any of us, so thank you. And we share a common passion for global trade and the importance of global trade. I represent the state of Maryland. The very first speech I gave, my maiden speech in the House of Representatives, was on trade. I worked very hard to get on the Ways and Means Committee because of trade. Worked very hard to get on the Senate Finance Committee because of trade. Trade is absolutely essential to the economy of the Port of Baltimore and my community. And yes, we want to see products coming in to our port. We also want to see products exports from our port. So I thank you, and it's been a real honor to serve on this committee. I deeply will miss not some of the hearings we've had, but most of the hearings I will miss. I certainly am not going to miss the vote-a-ramas that we have at times. But anyway, I'm concerned about where trade goes, because I've seen a major shift in the attitude towards open trade since I've been in the Congress of the United States. We saw administration after administration finding ways to expand trade. Now we find administration after administration being very reluctant to expand trading opportunities. And the challenges we have is that we want a level playing field. And when you're dealing with the PRC, you're dealing with a government-controlled economy where they're trying to change the rules and have everyone play according to their rules rather than the rules that were established through the leadership of the United States and open markets so that we could have at least reasonable standards for fair trade. So the IGC is a very important component of this, and I agree. We want it to be independent. We want it to be nonpartisan, but we don't want it to be naive. And the challenge we have, there's a reason why we want enforcement of trade rules, because that gives us a chance to be competitive against countries like China that don't play according to the same rules that we do. And we find at times, because of our objectivity, because we want to be so fair, the procedures we set up are too difficult and cumbersome to save industries that have been literally, by unfair trading practices, put out of business here in the United States. So I am concerned about the future of open trade, fair trade. And I think the ITC can play a very, very important role here. Congress has tried to fine-tune the enforcement issues. We've done it at times. But we also need the help of the ITC in telling us where we can be more effective in accomplishing enforcement without sacrificing the nonpartisan objective nature of what you do. So any thoughts on that?
Thank you, Senator. Excellent points, of course. I totally agree that one of the most important roles at the ITC is to be a partner with this committee and also with the committee on the House side to of course, the ITC doesn't make policy, but we support the policy initiatives that the committee is seeking and that the Congress is seeking. And I think it's really important. And I would commit that if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, to work closely with the committee and the committee staff to understand what their priorities are, to try and provide information from our side of what we're seeing, and to work with you to understand what the committee needs so that they can get their job done and institute an effective policy. So I agree with you that, if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, I want to make sure that there's a close, collaborative, bipartisan, independent relationship so that we're working to give the Congress the information they need so we can do better.
It's Greg.
Thank you for the question, Senator. I know Congress recently updated our anti-dumping laws in 2015. That was Senator Brown's initiative, of course, but there are still proposals, a follow-on proposal as well, and other proposals in that space to change how our anti-dumping laws are applied. And again, as Mr. Coughlin said, if fortunate enough to be confirmed, the ITC's role is not to make policy, it's to support the Senate Finance Committee, the House Committee on Ways and Means, and the executive branch in providing any information that you may need in order to make the policy changes that you wish to see. And if that includes making the process easier for petitioners or for respondents or including more information, whatever it is, streamlining a process, the ITC will provide that independent, objective information that you need to make the right decision.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
I thank my colleague, and I'm going to have more to say about all your service on the Finance Committee before the Senate is done. And we're joined now by the Mr. Enforcement, Mr. Trade Enforcement on this committee, who day in and day out says, look, this isn't that complicated. This is a question of whose side are you on? Whose side are you on? Are you going to be on the side of workers and businesses, or are you just going to let people cheat and just figure out clever ways with lawyers and experts to get around the trade laws? And there is something on the books that I always smile when I hear somebody mention it. It's called the Brown-Wyden Mechanism for Enforcing Key Provisions of USMCA. It makes me proud because I think the substance is right, but it makes me even prouder because I had a chance to do it with Mr. Trade Enforcement, the guy who day in and day out puts trade enforcement on the issue for senators and elected officials. And again, if somebody has missed it in a debate, Senator Brown brings it up and gets it back on the agenda. Senator Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for everything in this committee. This is, except, of course, for the Banking, Housing, Urban Affairs Committee, the best committee in the Senate. And Senator Crapo is agnostic on that, I assume. But I appreciate what we've been able to do on child tax credit in this committee, strengthening trade enforcement, as you said, protecting Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, CHIP, taking on the drug companies, PBMs, all that we've been able to do together. I'm so comfortable in this committee, I didn't wear a tie today in my last hearing. So thanks to all of you.
The canary is here.
Yeah, and my friend Ben Cardin and Marie, thank you for all of that. I'd like to share my frustration before questions, and I'm going to talk. I try to do questions more than talking today. I'm going to talk more than questions, but I do have one major kind of all-encompassing, I hope, question for both of you. But I want to share my frustration over what seems like an attempt to force these nominees through an expedited process before the end of the year. I want to echo the concern shared by Ohio steelworkers, domestic companies like Cleveland-Cliffs, one of the largest steel companies, especially if they're successful in buying U.S. Steel, will be one of the biggest steel companies in the world. Other stakeholders who are worried about the rush consideration. It's critical we take the time as a committee to thoroughly understand the way each of these nominees would engage as ITC commissioners and understand the philosophies that relates to ITC's role in enforcing anti-dumping and countervailing duty laws. As everyone here knows, the Commission plays a critical role in enforcing trade remedy laws. You both said that in your testimony, making sure American workers compete on a level playing field, the work that the Chairman and I have done together. ITC regularly receives petitions involving Ohio companies, Ohio workers. I understand just how important it is in the livelihood of steel workers in Cleveland, paper bag manufacturers in northern Kentucky, Whirlpool workers in Clyde, Ohio, and northwest part of the state, 10 mill workers across the Ohio River in Wyden, West Virginia. The ITC isn't just some quasi-judicial commission that exists, quote, to fulfill a range of trade-related matters to Ohio, mandates to Ohioans. Instead, workers in Ohio understand that ITC is the final decision maker when it comes to what's fair. These decisions are personal to Ohioans, and I think it's something you need to remember. These are individual people whose livelihoods depend on decisions you make here. And which communities maintain their economic vitality. I have seen in my state, in the city I grew up in, particularly, but everywhere, what bad trade policy has done, and to families and to communities as a whole. I go on to say there's probably no other member of the Senate in either party who's testified at the ITC and engaged with them more than I have. I agree with many of the stakeholders who've shared their concerns over the nature of today's hearing. These positions are too important to fast track. Thousands of workers in Ohio alone rely on you or the job that you are seeking to ensure a level playing field and protect their jobs against efforts by foreign exporters trying to evade U.S. trade laws. I just saw it in Wyden, West Virginia. Half those workers live in Belmont or Jefferson or Monroe County, Ohio, or close by, and lost their jobs. Well over, I believe, I think it was 300 initially. Now my question, when it comes to evaluating the merits of anti-dumping and countervailing duty cases, the job is to review the facts and apply the law. For years, I've worked to update our nation's anti-dumping and countervailing duty laws, first with Leveling the Playing Field Act, signed into law in 2015, most recently working with Senator Young, member of this committee, on Level the Playing Field 2.0 Act. Our bipartisan bill would further strengthen U.S. trade remedy laws to ensure they remain effective tools to fight back against unfair trade practices to protect American workers. Neither of you have experience with or expressed support for efforts to strengthen our existing laws. My understanding is that your role will not just be to apply the laws that exist, but to advise Congress, to advise this committee on ways legislation can help the ITC play a stronger role. I'd like to ask both of you today, convince me and my colleagues and the workers in our states who rely on AD-CBD process to address unfair trade. Convince us you'll strictly enforce the anti-dumping and countervailing duty laws, and convince us that you'll work productively with Congress on proposals to strengthen the ITC's capacity to go after serial cheaters. Ms. Craig, start with you, then Mr. Coughlin, you, and please answer those concerns. Ms. Craig.
Senator, thank you for raising a very important point. I also had the pleasure of working with you when I was a Senate Banking Committee staffer, so appreciate that. I know you were not here for my opening statement, but I come from a working class family in Pennsylvania, and I'm the proud granddaughter, great-granddaughter, and great-great-granddaughter of Philadelphia union workers, including roofers, including a machinist at Yarway, and I also, my great-great-grandfather on my father's side worked on the William Penn statue that actually adorns Philadelphia City Hall when he was at Tacony Iron and Steel Works. So for me, union work and hard work and blue-collar work is in my blood, and it's the reason that My family has been able to pursue the American dream, and it's the reason that I sit here today. I grew up going to job sites with my father, who was a house painter. He very wisely never let me paint, but I would help pick up scraps on the job sites. And so in my upbringing, I've connected deeply with people that are doing the jobs that often do come before the commission. As Mr. Coughlin and I discussed, and Ranking Member Crapo also brought up in his opening statement, one of the roles of a commissioner is also doing site visits with manufacturers that are going to be potentially impacted by a decision that the commission makes. I think that's very critical. It also factors into the understanding of the product that is in question, which can at times be very complex. And so seeing the manufacturing process firsthand, I think, is very important. In addition, we know, I don't think anyone in this room probably disagrees that China cheats in international trade. They are known for subsidizing their industries. They are known for selling at less than fair value. They also steal a lot of American IP and IP from other countries around the world. These laws were put in place by Congress, our anti-dumping laws, Section 201 and Section 337, by Congress to protect Americans that are being affected by those practices. And to the extent that those issues come before the commission, the role of the commissioner is to create a full docket of evidence, evaluate each case on the facts of the case, and rule fairly. And I think there's a reason why so many decisions have been unanimous at the ITC, regardless of the partisan split of the commissioners.
Thank you for the question, Senator. And I know from my research that you're a leader in this area. I also, by way of background, my family has always been a strong union family. My grandfather was in the Taylor Union in Chicago. My father and my mother were both in the Teachers Union in Chicago. As Ms. Craig said, and what we had discussed previously, is that when I used to work at the commission, it was very common for the commissioners to travel and to meet with industry leaders and labor leaders to understand things before cases are even filed, so that they have the practical knowledge that I think you're referring to, and not just sitting in an office somewhere reading a brief. So what I have indicated to your staff and to the committee is that I would welcome the opportunity to do that again, and to if invited, to come and travel and meet with labor leaders and business leaders and anyone who wants to sit down and talk to me and help me to understand better what the situation is, so that when complaints do come, I have a full understanding. And the other thing that I wanted to say to you, Senator, is like my North Star, so to speak, the guiding principle of coming back to the commission is to protect jobs and industries. That, to me, that's my #1 goal. That's why I'm coming back. I enjoyed doing that when I worked at the commission as a young lawyer, and having been in private practice and representing clients, you have to kind of, you have to advocate for your client, and so I would really relish the opportunity, if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, to have that role and to take a leadership role in trying to level the playing field so that our industries can compete fairly, because I know they will win if they have that opportunity.
Mr. Coggan, you ever walked a picket line?
As a young boy, I did, sir, with my father as a teacher, but not as an adult. As an attorney, I was in the union when I was with the commission. I was with the Federal Employee Union, but otherwise, I've been a lawyer. So I did as a young boy with my dad when he was in the Chicago Teachers Union, and they were striking seemed like almost every other year. And I remember my father, we would have to I knew that they were on strike because we would have powdered milk instead of, regular milk, and my mom would start, the meals would change, and I knew and my grandma would come over, and because my dad wasn't getting paid, and I could tell as a child, that things were changing based on sort of the
Ms. Craig, you ever walked a picket line?
No, Senator.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Chairman.
Colleagues, Senator Brown is making a very important point, that there are additional questions that need to be reviewed here. We're going to have Senator Cantwell ask her questions in a moment, but I want to tell my colleague that I share so many of these concerns. And in fact, when Senator Cantwell is done, I'm going to be asking about, and I guess this gives you a heads up, Congress has given the ITC the authority to combat not only actual injury to U.S. interests, but the threat of injury. And this hasn't been used a whole lot. And I think what Senator Brown is saying is that there are issues here to be examined. I'm going to ask about that. And I just want to say to colleagues, based on what I've heard in the last 2 hours, I think our members have plenty to consider as the Finance Committee continues to review these nominees. Senator Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to the nominees, both of you, what factors would you consider in drawing the line between useful enforcement mechanisms and those that could be harmful to American consumers, producers, and manufacturers? And on the other side of the enforcement authority, obviously, is protecting U.S. IP against foreign importers in Section 337 determination, what weight should be given to that public interest standard. If you could answer brief comments on both of those.
I'll start with respect. I'll start with the 337 because that's the background that I come from, and my views on the public interest, based on the way the statute's written and the precedent that was created at the commission, is that. We talk about public safety, welfare, and impact on third parties, but typically the issue boils down to whether third parties are going to be harmed if a remedy were to be issued against an entity that was found to engage in unfair trade practice, i.e. Infringe a patent or copyright. And it typically boils down to whether there are alternatives in the market to the item that's being excluded, such that the third parties are going to be harmed because, for example, it could be a component in some larger device or something like that. And so,
do you think we need more clarity here? I mean, you've seen a lot of cases. Do you think we need more clarity here?
any guidance that would, obviously the commission doesn't make policy, any guidance that we could get from Congress on this thing would, in my view, would be welcome.
Thank you.
I agree with that sentiment, Senator. As you know, in 337 cases, the remedy can be tailored, and so that also is a factor. Depending on the individual facts of the case, you can have an exclusion order, but the commission also has the authority to issue cease and desist orders or to grandfather in, let's say, a component that's already in a lot of devices, and then just prohibit future importation of that component. So there are ways to incorporate the public interest that's not a full, we're not going to take any action at all. But of course, American intellectual property is extremely valuable, and having a law in place to protect our innovators and our innovation economy, I think, is very important. I can speak to Title VII if you would like, or I didn't.
Yeah, that was a big open-ended first question.
Okay.
But it kind of reminds me of this place. Like, we can argue and say we're not going to agree to something, and just, we can be in a conference and then just say we're just going to walk away and we're not going to deal with that issue. But when you do that in trade, sometimes the issue is never resolved. And the businesses, in our case, in Silicon and Moses Lake, a plant shut down because we had a dispute and nothing was resolved for 10 plus years. Thank God the company's reinvented itself in a different way. But the point is, where do you draw the line between getting into, what standards are you looking at before you look at tariffs? What kind of thoughts do you have about this?
Well, Senator, I think it does depend on the statute. In Title VII cases, as well as Section 201, the commission doesn't consider, the commission rules on material injury, right? So the statute's very clear on the factors that the commission can and cannot weigh. So as a commissioner, if confirmed, I would stick to the text of the law in those areas. It's a little bit different in 337 cases where you do have 4 fairly broad public interest factors. And my understanding, though, is that public interest determinations have not overruled essentially an exclusion order in many cases.
Yep, thank you. Mr. Coleman, do you have any comments on this? Because I can guarantee you every day I'm offended sometimes with what the other side does, but I don't walk away.
Yeah. The only thing that,
I try to resolve the issue. And I just feel like in this world of a global economy with so many consumers living outside the United States, we need, I hear what you're saying. You're basically saying, I'm just going to follow the text and I'm going to be very specific. But this is going to be a very big issue moving forward. And the problem is then when we just walk away, we're not getting anything done. So the question is, how do you digest this when there's so much intertwined now? And how do we get to the real issues? I think IP and IP theft is a real issue.
yes, I absolutely agree, of course, Senator, you raise a good point. And yeah, I've seen that in my private practice as well. And the only thing that I would add to what Ms. Craig said is that, you know, if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, I would welcome the opportunity to meet with you and your staff to understand better the concerns that you're raising today and try and see if we can figure out ways to move forward.
I'm just saying, I'm pretty sure this is going to be the issue du jour in 2025, but as a very trade-dependent economy, I'm just saying it's easy to walk away from the table. It's easy to push back and say, we're in a dispute. The question is, you know, is that where we want to be in what are the best practices? I personally think we should have a international, you know, organization, if you will, a tech NATO. I think the 5 most sophisticated countries in democracy should get together and say, if you want to buy technology, buy from these countries. Don't buy from countries that have a government backdoor. Don't buy from countries that don't respect intellectual property. Don't do this. And that would be a bigger behemoth in the international marketplace to say, follow these principles, follow these technologies, as opposed to just getting into a trade dispute that doesn't resolve this. We want to use our might where we can use our might. And I'm not saying don't ever use them. I'm just saying, to me, I think we have to think of some new strategies going forward. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Heaven forbid there be such a logical approach. And Senator Cantwell and I have talked about this on a number of occasions, and this question of building American leverage, I think, is everything, and I want to associate myself with her remarks. I have one other question with respect to this matter of the statute giving the ITC the authority to combat not just actual injury, but the threat of injury. And the Commission has been reluctant to use this tool, and particularly since enforcement is basically about China. And China will just overrun one of our key industries with massive subsidies that make it hard for American workers and businesses to proceed. There's just a clear pattern of abuse. And I'm wondering how you all would react to that. Should the Commission be doing more on this matter that we have given the Commission, we being the Congress, have given to the Commission authority to deal with? Mr. Coughlin.
Thank you for that question, and I think the short answer is that, you know, if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, that would be something that I would like to look into. I know that in the 337 area, for example, that it specifically says in the statute that you can have a domestic industry exist or in the process of being established. And I think you're exactly right that in my time practicing at the Commission, I have seen that rarely used. And so I would look forward if I'm...
You said you've seen it rarely used. Were there instances where you thought it should have been used? That is a pretty short question.
So as an advocate practicing before the ITC, I have seen situations where it could be used, but I know that the standard of proof can in some instances be high, and so it might be something. In other words, it can sometimes be difficult to show from a practitioner's standpoint. Now, I'm not at the Commission. I don't. You know, if I'm fortunate to be confirmed, I need to talk and understand things better. But it'd be something that I would be curious to. I'd be willing to work with you and your staff on, because in my in my experience as a practitioner, the burden of proof is often sort of difficult to show, and so it might be an area that we should be looking into.
Okay. Ms. Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My understanding is somewhat similar. In the petitions that I've kind of glanced at, a lot of them allege both material injury and threat of material injury, but in those cases, there already is a domestic industry, and there are imports that are already coming into the country. In solely a threat of material injury case, you wouldn't necessarily need imports to show that there is a threat of material injury, correct? And so my understanding, I have asked members that the commission this, my understanding is similar to Mr. Coughlin's. It can just be easier to hinge on material injury that's actually happening instead of trying to predict the threat of material injury. Now, again, the statute does lay out some factors for the commissioners to consider in terms of threat, including potential for turning on new production in an existing facility in a foreign country. So those are factors to look at. But I can't give you a concrete answer as to exactly why the commission is not necessarily making more determinations there. That's just my understanding. I'm happy to, dig into that more, and of course, if confirmed, would be more than willing to engage with you on that question.
The point, and this is what Senator Cantwell touched on, is how we're going to use American leverage. That's not a partisan issue. That's not Democrats and Republicans. That's red, white, and blue. And the reason the Congress gave this power to the commission is that we all go home, our new senator from New Jersey, those of us from the Northwest, and we hear from our constituents about how government doesn't act until everybody is devastated. They're just picking up the pieces. And I think your answers reflect we're not talking about real cases here, because we can't talk about real cases. We can't opine on those. I'm a lawyer in name only. My wife agreed to marry me. She said, "You're not a real lawyer. You were director of the Gray Panthers and all that." But we got to get more leverage. And that's what this hearing is really all about, is to talk about how we're going to, mobilize on a bipartisan basis to protect our workers and our businesses, because China is not sitting around kind of waiting for us to have, a whole bunch of, opinion pieces and articles and the like. They're moving now. They're moving aggressively. So I'm going to let Senator Crapo make any remarks that he'd like to make, and then I'll wrap up. We've got the formalities, but I want to make clear again that you haven't heard from me or I think colleagues across the dais about there's only one partisan way to go here. I think the question is, what's the American way to go? And that's why I feel so strongly about this concept of leverage. Senator Crapo.
I simply want to add to what you say, Mr. Chairman. We are agreed that the United States must use every tool that it has to maximize our leverage against anti-competitive conduct by other nations against our economy. It's time for us to stand strong and firmly. And I look forward to working with you on this as we move forward.
I as well. And let me thank our nominees. It's pretty clear everybody in the House agrees that the ITC plays an extraordinarily important role in trade enforcement. I've already indicated that we've heard from a wide variety of members, and we've got plenty to consider as the Finance Committee continues our review of these nominees. We want to thank them, their families, for their cooperation. With that, the hearing's adjourned.